Good evening and welcome to Views with Joyce Waddell. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. We have a very interesting show for you. We want to talk about the devastations of floods. You know, we have very, very good natural resources as a result of the way the earth evolved. We've gone through the Ice Age at one time, the Stone Age, and there have been constant evolving of the earth and our natural resources. We have the mountains, the oceans, the rivers, the valleys, and now our superhighways, and now our space and atmospheric travel. These are all related to natural resources, things that make the world what it is. And sometimes we have a balance, an unequal balance when it comes to natural resources that creates our hurricanes, our floods, our major disasters, our tornadoes. And those imbalances have effects on all of us, even though we may not be in the region when there's devastation, even though we may not even be very close to it. We may still have some of the effects of it. The rain, the wind, the water, and the floods still may affect us, and we may not be in the midst of it. But we have one country, the country of Haiti. It's a small country, right off the coast of Florida, and they have really had their share of natural disasters. Things that you never know when they're going to come. But we do know that hurricane season is usually in September. And we can expect that somewhere around this United States, around the world, and very close to us, there will be a major hurricane. We're looking at Matthew now, and Matthew tends to be the worst since 1999. It's the worst hurricane since then. And so some of the things associated with Matthew is forecasters show Matthew will have the greatest impact in North Carolina, and that's going to be starting right now. You'll be viewing this a little bit later, but you'll be viewing it from the time that Matthew started. It started out as a Category 4, and we couldn't believe it. We've never been able to track hurricanes the way we are tracking them today. From the inceptions, from where they start in the ocean and they start winding around, we see Category 4 losing strength to Category 3, Category 2, and then sometimes it even gets greater, loses strength and moves and gains that strength back again. But we know to watch for the eye of the hurricane, because as it moves forward and twists and turns, it brings with it strong winds, a lot of water, a lot of flooding. Sometimes it even sweeps away homes, cars, livestock, things that we never thought of, leaving us. And that's what we say when we talk about the natural disasters. And so forecasters show that Matthew will have the greatest impact in North Carolina. Since 1999, President Barack Obama signed an emergency aid to make aid available for 66 central and eastern North Carolina counties. That's amazing. Matthew, responsible for hundreds of deaths, should lose power as it churns forward, as it moves from Florida to Georgia. But look at the damage it has done to Haiti. Haiti has been hard hit over and over. And not only that, what they're trying to do, many churches in the area are loading vans, loading cargoes, trains, buses, and sending food and relief so that people can have clean water, clean clothing, and can get back to a normal life. This has happened to Haiti time and time again. But they always are able to survive And one of the most devastating stories that we've heard that happened in Haiti was a family, mother, father, and 7 children. The children were gone. And here's the mother and father had to leave their home after all of these years. Some had to leave on the backs of others. Some had to leave on makeshift boats that had to drive themselves through the flood waters. But the water so rapid and going so quickly, it almost swept them away. But we had to do what's necessary. And if we think back to Katrina and the devastation there, why it was a disaster, people had to leave their homes down in New Orleans. We see some of the same thing here in Haiti. Many of the people in the countryside are the people who will be hit hardest because they will be so far away for relief to reach them. And as happens when you have distribution of food, distribution of water, distributions of clothing, those who get there first get what they want, and many of them don't think about the other people. They want to get enough and package it up and store it up among themselves so that when this happens again, because they think they're not going to get any more. But this is a time of sharing. We're approaching the Thanksgiving season, the season of giving, so this is a time of sharing. And not only should we be sharing, everybody around the world should be sharing with our Haitian friends, because people need people for survival. And we all are related to each other in some way, fashion, shape, or form. And that means that we must help. And so when we look at it's had devastating effects there, but look at North Carolina. Sometimes we think we are exempt because here we are going further inland, but not always. I remember the devastation of Hugo. That was the worst hurricane here in Charlotte. It came unexpectedly. We heard about it, but we thought it would never hit us, and it did. It was devastating. Power lines. You look out and see street signs twisted just as though you had taken them in your hands as a toy and twisted them around. And even more and worse than anything is when you see power lines down, especially if you're traveling. You don't know which way to go. Should I go home and cross this power line, which may be devastating? It may ignite a spark and kill me. Should I turn and go the other way? But here you are in a dilemma. There are people in front of you and motorists behind you and beside you. So you're almost stuck to make a decision. And at that time, you must listen to what they're telling you. Never go over power lines. Never cross power lines, because you don't know what might happen. You don't know if you'll do further damage. You don't know if it may end your life. So those are some tips to never cross power lines. Another tip is to keep moving and do not stop in the middle of the flood waters. Keep your car moving forward. And I think we've all experienced when driving that when you drive in the right-hand lane with all the floods and waters, you see then that it's splash, splash. But when you change lanes and you stay in the left-hand lane, it's usually a little bit better because the waters are then moving toward the holes, the culprits, and the main hose that will keep the water in your streets dry. And so as we think about the things that's happening as a result of Matthew and what it's doing that's never been done before. At least 4 people died in Florida. An elderly St. Lucia County couple died from carbon monoxide fumes while running a generator in their garage. They didn't know. And many of the people in the countryside that we just saw a minute ago, yeah, These people had to leave with whatever they had on their backs. And just imagine that. Those things that they worked for all their lives are gone. The things that they cherished, the memories, the photographs, the furniture, the clothing, all the valuables, even the food in their homes, gone in the blink of an eye. All they had was what was on their backs as they had to leave those homes, not knowing if they would ever be able to return, not knowing if they would ever be able to rebuild, to acquire some of the things that they had worked all their lives for. And so some of the other things that we saw, the storm weakened to a Category 2 hurricane, but still packed maximum sustained winds of 110 miles an hour. And I just can imagine driving in a car at 110 miles an hour. That's a tremendous amount of speed. That's almost unheard of, with winds traveling 110 miles an hour. What we have then is killer winds. Those, if you get in the path of, will cause destruction that you have never, ever seen before. Think about the couple. Why was that generator in their garage? Why was it there? Why didn't they know that it would produce carbon monoxide poisoning and that would kill them? So we think about the natural disasters, the natural resources that's here on this earth for us to enjoy: our water, our wind, our mountains, our streams, our rivers. They're here for us to enjoy. They can be our great friend. And sometimes abnormal things happen and they begin to be one of our greatest enemies. We're going to pause for a moment, and then we're going to take you to some things that are happening right here with all this wind, right here, that we have to caution ourselves about in the future. And so we're going to take you to a choir that was singing here and some of their beautiful songs.
Tender and mild.
Artists, we're continuing to talk about the devastations that we see and that we experience with our hurricanes, and that we're in hurricane season. Sometimes they come one after another. Just because it's happening now doesn't mean that this is the end. But Matthew is doing a lot of damage. And we also think about the wonderful things related to our wind, our air, our water, and how natural resources play a very important part in all of our lives. Now let's take a look again at Matthew. As we look at the eye, what you call the eye of the hurricane. See that eye of the hurricane, how it twists and folds. And that twist that it's going there, that funnel motion that moves forward is the things that is so devastating. And it's amazing how it can just gather all of that speed, great speed, as it moves forward. And let's think about what happened. Hurricanes just like this. In 1954, Hurricane Hazel, I remember that. Its eventual death toll was 1,000. It set the decade's benchmark in North Carolina for killer storms. But it was 1959's Hurricane Gracia that made history here. It surged ashore as a Category 4. That's a Category 4. That's very strong winds. Only the third in the state's big one to slash ashore during the early days of coastal development. Edisto Island was basically buried. It was underwater, and Beaufort took years to rebuild. Many of its great storms had lasting effects on us, and these are the effects that we will always remember. We won't ever forget them. Our coastal South Carolina city of Charleston was hard hit with Matthew, and hard hit back with so many other disasters. That's not Hurricane Hugo, just Hugo, like a familiar troublemaker neighbor, will be remembered here. And I remember it here in Charlotte. It needs no applications and no courtesy ties. And some of us were lucky because our lights were out just maybe one day. And some of us were at a very unfortunate state. Lights stayed out more than a week. Insurance company was scrambling all along to settle claims. Claims that they'd never seen so many of before. They never thought that Hugo would tear up Charlotte the way it did. It was, and is the greatest calamity of living memory. It drove ashore here one terrifying night in September 1989. It was so terrifying, I ran to the door, and it seems like the wind was going to push the door open. I pushed the washing machine and the dryer behind the door to make certain if that happened, it would be something that would be a protector. And what I often remember, you have to decide in your house where you're going to be. Choose a place not close to windows, in a closet possibly, or where there's supporting walls, so that if the roof is blown off, so that if the doors are blown open, if your windows are crashed, you'll be in a safe place. So that's one of the key things that you have to remember. Choose that safe place, and don't wait until the disaster hits. Choose it so that when you hear it coming, you will be there and you will be safe. And so great was its power. It twisted the steel of the Ben Sawyer Bridge like a pretzel. It ripped off roofs and kicked over the forest. And imagine all the trees in your yard that you never thought of. Trees that had been there for 20, 30 years. They've had storms before, but nothing like this. They were down, and they were causing lots of trouble for everyone. So what has happened in our storms as we look back? The storm of 1893 So it doesn't happen often, but it happens. Devastations. Striking unmercifully at high tide on August the 28th, great storm of 1893 pushed an enormous 16-foot dome of water onto the outlying islands. Winds estimated at 120 ripped through Charleston, South Carolina, our coastal town. Tens of thousands were left homeless. They didn't know what to do. And Clara Barton, who we heard of, the great nurse, wrote in her autobiography that 20,000 refugees of coastal communities struggled into the streets of Beaufort, South Carolina. They struggled there. They had nowhere to go. They were not prepared. So that's something that we have to do, and we have to think ahead to prepare. It may not happen within 20 years, but we have to have ourselves ready, willing, and able. And so we're going to go back to our choir singing. That was the Barbara Scotia College Choir. They're grown now. They were in school at that time when they came to the studio. It was holiday season, like it is now, like we are now approaching. We're going to listen to another of those songs that they shared with us.
Have yourself
Audience, I want to thank you for being with us on Views with Joyce Waddell as we have talked about the disasters, devastating effects of hurricanes. And now we have looked at the track of Matthew and what Matthew is doing to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Haiti, most of all, hard hit. Tune in again next week for another interesting program.